I sat on the back porch, rocking slowly in my aunt's old rocking chair and watching life go by. I had 3 fingers of Jack Daniels on the rocks in one hand and a beautiful blonde curled up on my lap, fast asleep. And I thought about my past life. I was the middle child. My older brother Frank was an apple in my parents' eyes, but I wasn't so much. My sister Sarah was adored by my father, and my parents gave them everything they wanted. Why, you ask? When my brother was born, he was a healthy 10-pound baby with blonde hair and blue eyes. My sister weighed 6 pounds, 5 ounces, also with blonde hair and blue eyes. Both were born normal and were proportionally built. I, on the other hand, was not like that. I weighed 8 pounds, had black hair, and was considered ugly. My arms were abnormally long with large hands that reached to my knees. My father accused my mother of cheating, and no amount of her denial could calm him down. He called me an atavism or a missing link and immediately disowned me. My brother, at 16 years old, was 6 feet tall and the captain of the school football team, and could not make a single mistake, although he was a complete fool in his studies. I was 2 years younger and 6 inches shorter, but I was captain of the chess club and the general knowledge team. When I was growing up, I was clumsy and often tripped out of the blue, so my mother sent me to dance. It was meant to teach me balance and grace, not so much for my sake as to spare my mother the embarrassment of my clumsiness. After several incidents, my mother signed me up for a boxing club after school. This was a turning point in my life. The club was an old-style gym that smelled of sweat and ointment, and I loved it. Thanks to my dance lessons, I was nimble on my feet, and for the first time in my life, my long arms were an advantage. The trainer started by making me lift weights to strengthen my body. Within 6 months, I was fighting at a heavier weight and winning, but my main interest was in weightlifting. The gym had a weightlifting club, and I joined it, continuing to box to keep in shape. My brother is already 6'3", and he looked like a linebacker, and some scouts were starting to show interest in him. The parents were proud of their eldest son, but Sarah and I were barely noticed or tolerated. I started paying attention to girls. One day, I was sitting at lunch when one of the cheerleaders sat down across from me. I was waiting for one of the athletes to sit down and start mocking me because of my long arms. I was called the Monkey Man. Instead, she looked at me shyly and asked, "You're Frank's little brother, aren't you?" Expecting some kind of ridicule, I replied, "So what?" "Frank says you're some kind of genius. Is that true?" Still not trusting her, I replied. Compared to Frank, that could be said for any vole with learning difficulties. She laughed loudly. "That's true, but the truth is that I need a tutor and I'm about to fail math. If I don't get at least a B+, I won't be able to get into Berkeley next year, and my dad won't buy me that Porsche he promised. Mom says if I pay tuition, she'll pay $10 an hour. Are you interested?" Damn right, I was interested, but I didn't want to waste time on an empty head. "Yes, I am interested, but you will have to work hard and not brush me off so that you can come out, or I will. Can you make that kind of commitment?" She practically jumped for joy and hugged me around the neck. "I promise, and if you trick me, I'll be in your debt." We agreed to meet the next evening after weightlifting class. Her name was Gloria, she was beautiful and not at all from my class, so I had no illusions about romance. She studied hard and my savings account increased accordingly. Her grades improved and her parents were happy, but the best thing for me was that she and her parents spread the word and soon I became in demand. I taught several other underachievers and even made friends. One day, on my way home, a sportsman and a couple of his friends stopped me. "You're an asshole who dated my girlfriend, you little shit, and I'm going to teach you not to mess with other guys and their girlfriends." I tried to explain that I was just teaching her, but he didn't like it. As I walked away, his friends decided to join in, but before they could do anything, the wrestling coach intervened. "If you guys want to fight, come to the gym tomorrow night after school, and you can fight there one-on-one instead of 3, now leave." We all went our separate ways, but the next evening I was the only one who came to the gym. Wrestling practice was going on, and I stayed to watch, since my regular student went to visit her parents for a week. The coach came up to me and told me he was impressed with my appearance, and then asked if I wanted to join the team. I said I would like to give it a try, and that was the start of my wrestling career. Frank was still the favorite, Sarah was in second, and I was disappointingly last. For Frank's birthday, he got a 3-year-old Nissan Warrior, I got an old scooter, and when Sarah got a 2-year-old Toyota. Frank tried to take advantage of it at every opportunity, but Sarah said I could borrow her car whenever I wanted and seemed confused. Halfway through his senior year, Frank came to me asking for a favor. Can I teach him math, English, and biology? Apparently winning a football scholarship wasn't enough. He actually needed at least a B in those classes to get into his preferred college. I almost cracked up laughing. However, after some thought, I agreed, but only on the weekends. It would seriously complicate his social life. One day, while I was having lunch, Sandra Lynch came and sat next to me. Hey Jay, do you mind if I join you? There was no way in hell I was going to say no. I tried to act cool. Okay, if you want, I don't mind. Jay, the summer dance is in 2 weeks. Do you want to invite me? Yes, of course, why not? I hired a car using some of the money I saved from tutoring and picked her up promptly at 7. Her parents didn't even come to see me. We went to the dance and I walked in with her on my arm, looking like a cat that had gotten the cream. We sat down with some of her friends who grinned at me. My brother came over and patted me on the back. This should have made me realize that everything is not as it seems. I went and got her fruit punch, making sure it wasn't flavored with anything, and we had a couple of dances. We were sitting and catching our breath when she leaned towards me and said, I came here with you because Frank asked me to, but I'm leaving with Frank. He just wanted to prove what a loser you are. She then started laughing at me, and the rest of her friends joined in, shouting loser in unison and clapping. I felt tears of shame run down my cheeks as I was ridiculed and pushed out of the dance. I refused to continue helping my brother with his studies, and he complained to his father. I told him what happened, but he just told me to forget about it. The next day when I returned home, Frank was waiting for me. Listen, little guy, if you don't help me, I won't get into college, so get out your books and let's get started. After what you did, I wouldn't even put it out if you were on fire, so fuck off. Frank hit me, but because I was a boxer, I knew how to take punches, and when I hit him, my father came into the room to investigate what was going on. Did you hit your brother? Well, he hit me first. You little bastard. My father punished me. When I started college, my brother was kicked out for poor grades. It turned out that he was not as good a football player as he thought, and scouts were no longer interested in him. My father owned a small construction company, and my brother went to work there as a junior office assistant. His father sent him to evening courses in construction management with the condition, if you fail again, I will wash my hands of it. I lived with Aunt Marie. She was very proud of me when I received my diploma with honors, but my parents did not come to the graduation, which did not surprise me. I started at a new college studying business management, accounting, and psychology. I also signed up for 2 classes at the local community college in the evening nutrition and physical education. I wanted to open my own gym in the future. The college I chose was only 20 miles from my aunt's house, so I went there every day, which made my aunt very happy. I avoided romantic relationships as I was focused on my studies. I said goodbye to my friends at the gym, and my boxing coach recommended me to another gym near college. I wasted no time and immediately signed up for a new gym, but it turned out that they no longer offered boxing classes. The owner was Phil Harding, who welcomed me to the gym, as my old trainer had called him, and told him I would be coming soon. He was over 60, but in excellent shape. The gym was divided into 2 parts. Downstairs there was an old-fashioned gym similar to my old one, and upstairs there was a more modern one with exercise equipment. The gym didn't have boxing, but there was a weightlifting club and an MMA school, so I signed up for both. In college, it quickly became clear that I was a quick learner, and my professor gave me a test to join Mensa. Unfortunately, I failed to pass, scoring below the required 98th percentile, so I was just below genius level. I dropped out of chess, but I had to continue on the general knowledge team because it was a condition of my scholarship. As my academic success became widely known, I was again approached for additional tutoring and began earning extra money. One night, on my way home from class, I was a few miles from home when I noticed a broken-down car with the hood up. It was December, so I was driving my aunt's pickup. It was too cold for a scooter, and my aunt only used the truck on weekends. As I drove by, I saw two men trying to drag a woman into a car. I stopped and backed up. I saved her. The woman turned out to be a girl about my age, and she was shaking a lot, so I took off my jacket and offered it to her, which she gratefully accepted. I called the sheriff and told him what happened and my actions, and that we were now on our way to the hospital. He said he would send out a patrol and also arrange for both vehicles to be towed. When he asked the girl's name, I had to admit that I didn't ask her name, to which he grinned and said that he would meet us at the hospital. By the time we got to the hospital, I learned that her name was Kimberly Scott, and she had simply run out of gas. The sheriff was waiting for us in the emergency room as I led Kimberly inside. She was no longer sobbing and was able to explain herself. The sheriff took our statements and asked me to stay until someone came to pick up Kim. She said that no one calls her Kimberly except her father when he is angry with her. While we were waiting for her to be examined, Kim called her father to come pick her up. There was an animated conversation between them before she ended the call. Kim was taken to an examination room, and we just had to wait for what seemed like an eternity. While we were waiting, a tall, athletic man of about 50 entered the emergency room, demanding to see his daughter. I heard the sheriff mutter, "Holy shit." Then he walked up to the man and began a conversation with active gesticulation, partly in my direction. Eventually, they approached me, and the sheriff introduced me to Kim's father, Judge Arthur Scott. The judge shook my hand and shook it vigorously. "Young man, I am forever in your debt. If you hadn't stopped and intervened, I'm afraid to even imagine what could have happened. I don't know how to thank you." At that moment, Kim left the examination room, accompanied by the doctor. She rushed to her father, and they hugged. The doctor said she was fine except for a few bruises that would heal in a few days. He handed her father an envelope and said there were a couple of pills in it to help her sleep that night, and he left. Father and daughter also left without saying another word, as if the sheriff and I no longer mattered. The sheriff looked at me, shrugged his shoulders, and said, "No offense, he thinks his shit doesn't stink. He treats everyone like they owe him something, and she's not far off. It's a result of them being one of the richest families in the state. But thank you for everything you've done. If it weren't for you, I'd probably be investigating a murder tomorrow. You'll probably have to appear in court to testify, but it won't take long." We separated. He returned to work, and I went to my aunt. A couple of months later, I actually testified against two men, and both received 15 years for attempted kidnapping. Over the next 2 years, two things happened that changed my life. First, I won the state weightlifting championship 2 years in a row and received sponsorship offers. The other was my aunt, who died of a stroke while sitting in her favorite rocking chair. I was told it was painless and very quick. I called my mother, told her the bad news, and told her I would work it out. She agreed, but was otherwise unmoved because she and my sister didn't get along and my aunt hated my father. After the funeral, which was well attended, a man in a gray suit took me aside and said that he was my aunt's lawyer and could I make an appointment with him. I made an appointment for Saturday morning, since my commitments did not allow me to meet on weekdays. When I got home that Friday, I was ambushed and my mom, dad, and brother were waiting for me. They got inside and rummaged through my aunt's bureau and belongings. Dad smugly told me that the house was his now and he was going to give it to Frank so I would have to leave. Sorry, did I miss the reading of the will? Dad, don't try to be clever. There is no will, so the house belongs to your mother. First, I don't have to try to be smart. I'm smart, and since the will hasn't been read yet, you have no right to be here, so leave before I call the sheriff. And second, the will be read tomorrow. No one told us, so it's illegal to begin with. In fact, this is not true. Only those mentioned in the will need to be informed, and since you were not mentioned, then you were not invited. They finally left when I threatened to call the sheriff and report that my father had violated the restraining order. The next day I went to see my lawyer, who informed me that my aunt had left everything to me. I now had my own 4-bedroom house and about 40 acres of land. There was still some money and shares. There was not much money, only about 60,000, but the shares were more interesting. When my father wanted to start his own company, he couldn't get enough funds from the bank, so he asked my uncle for the rest of the money. My uncle, being no fool, insisted that he be given shares in the company as collateral until the loan was repaid. My uncle never told my aunt about the deal, and the debt was never paid off, and the dividends were never paid either. I decided to let a lawyer sort it out. Life continued as before, but I missed my aunt. The pickup truck was now mine, so I sold the scooter. I was nearing the end of my senior year. I won the state weightlifting championship again. I could bench press 500 pounds and deadlift 420 pounds. To say I looked strange would be an understatement. I weighed 230 pounds, stood 5 feet 8 inches tall, and with my abnormally long arms and hands, I looked like a short gorilla. My muscles were so pronounced that I had to wear tailored clothes to hide my size. I mostly wore short-sleeved shirts as I had to wear specially made shirts to cover my long arms. I was happy with my life. Women and sex were not the driving force. I had a lot of sex, but I wasn't interested in starting a relationship. Most of the women I slept with were superficial, only interested in sex. I met some local women and impressed them with my dancing skills. One day, towards the end of last year, I received a strange phone call. It was from a lawyer who said that if I wanted to hear something in my favor, I should be in his office at 10 a.m. the next day. I almost decided to ignore his invitation, but later I wanted to do it. The next morning I arrived at the indicated office. I was immediately led into the office, and in the center of the room I saw Judge Arthur Scott, Kim's father. He extended his hand to me, and we shook hands, but he barely waited for me to let go of his hand, as if he was afraid of getting dirty. They asked me to sit down, and I sat down, waiting for an explanation. The judge spoke first. "Look, James, I understand that you're graduating from college this year and haven't found a job yet." At this point, I thought he was going to offer me a job, but another offer was waiting for me. "I have one offer for you. It's a little unconventional, but very profitable, at least for you. First, I have to ask, are you married or dating someone?" The question seemed strange to me, but I answered, "No, there's no one in my life yet, so what?" "Well, there's no easy way to say it, so I'll say it straight. Kim got pregnant. I know who the father is, and now is not the best time for him to start a family. He needs to become a senior vice president before he can do that. A family will only slow down his career advancement. My suggestion is that you and Kim get married and stay married until he is ready to get married. Then you will get divorced and everyone will be happy. Your marriage will only be on paper. I will provide a suitable home. You will sleep in separate rooms, but to others you will have to look like a loving couple. If you agree, I will transfer $500,000 to your account, and you will also receive income as a consultant while you are married. You will have minimal contact with the child, as I will provide a nanny who will raise him. You will be required to remain married for a minimum of 5 years, or until the child's father becomes a senior vice president. If you divorce within the first 5 years, the $500,000 will have to be paid back. I understand that it is unrealistic to go without sex for so long, so you can conduct your business at least 50 miles away and in complete secrecy. As for Kim, the baby's father will visit her at my house from time to time, and they will spend the night there together. It is also possible that they will go somewhere on the weekend. I already have a contract ready, you just need to sign it." "Well, what do you say?" I sat there, stunned. "How can you treat your own daughter like that?" "Why me?" I asked. "It's simple. First of all, I know I can trust you after what you did for Kim. And secondly, I know that my daughter cannot love someone like you. She needs to be very desperate." His answer made me angry, and I decided to play my own game with him. Sounds good, but I want my lawyer to look at the contract first. Listen, puppy, the offer is good. Just sign, and I will organize everything. I'm not as stupid as you think. I have all the cards here. Kim is already pregnant, and soon it will become obvious. Then your little plan will cost nothing. Give me the contract here, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. He almost threw the documents at me and walked out, leaving his lawyer. I looked at the lawyer and noticed a slight smile on his face. He nodded to me and hurried after his master. The next day, I made an appointment with my aunt's lawyer and gave him the contract for review. "Okay, Jay, you have the advantage. What do you want to do?" asked the lawyer. "This smug bastard needs to be taught a lesson. What do you think I can get?" "Oh, I like your approach, but I have to warn you. Judge Scott is a vindictive guy. He might come after you later." "I'll think about it when the time comes." "Okay, give me a couple of days. Make an appointment for the end of the week on the way out, and I'll have something ready by then." I left feeling much better. If the deal is successful, I will have enough money to start my own business much sooner than I planned. I met with the lawyer on Friday and was delighted with the changes to the contract. I called Judge Scott's lawyer and made an appointment. His office called me back the same day to confirm an appointment for Monday. The speed with which Scott agreed to meet showed his desperation. I think I could beat him at poker. We met at his lawyer's office on Monday morning, and I gave him the new contract. He realized that I had all the cards, and after reading the contract, he signed it and threw it at me. I insisted that the lawyer notarize the contract on the spot. When this was done, he reached for the document. "Not so fast," I said. "First, make 3 copies and have them certified by a notary. Keep 1 copy for yourself. I will receive the original and give the third to my lawyer." "This is an unusual practice. I have to keep the original." "This is not discussed. Either this or nothing." I achieved my goal. I put the original contract in a safe at the bank and gave a copy to my lawyer. The new contract contained the following terms, reducing all legal language. 1. Scott pays me $500,000 to marry his daughter, and he will pay all taxes associated with this amount. 2. The duration of marriage must be 5 years. For each additional year or portion thereof, I will receive an additional $100,000 tax-free amount. During the term of the contract, I will receive income as a consultant in the amount of $25,000 per year, also tax-free. 3. Scott will pay for all expenses associated with our marriage, including the purchase of a 5-room house with a nanny apartment above a double garage. At the end of the contract, the house will be registered in my name. 4. After the birth of the child, it will be registered in my name. As a father, I will consent to the adoption of the child by Kim's new husband. 5. All meetings between Kim and the child's father must be conducted with the utmost caution. If anyone finds out about their relationship, or I hear something offensive about me, it will be grounds for an immediate divorce, and I will keep everything. This rule also applies to my relationships. 6. Meetings between Kim and her lover will be limited to 2 weekends a month at Scott's house. She can also date him 5 weekends a year out of state. Every year she can spend 1 week on holiday with him. During these meetings, the child will be with the Scotts. 7. Kim must respect me in every aspect of our marriage, except in the bedroom. She must not stay overnight without my permission. The same applies to me. 8. I will have minimal contact with the child because I do not want to form a bond with him that will confuse him when he leaves the family. 9. I will be able to develop my own business, not related to joint property, and Kim will not have rights to it. After the meeting, Scott approached me. "You little bastard, I didn't expect this from you, but know that I will still emerge victorious." After these words, he left the office, and his lawyer nodded to me again and said, "In all my years of working for him, I've never seen him so angry and defeated, so be careful." He shook my hand, and I left. The following Saturday, we met again at his lawyer's, but this time together with Kim. I was taken back to the same office, and when I saw Kim, I couldn't help but check to see if she was starting to show signs of pregnancy. Not yet, but I noticed that she was crying. Her father began the meeting. Well, since everyone is here, I want to make an announcement. The wedding is scheduled for next Saturday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at St. Mark's Church. You are going to my tailor this afternoon to order a decent suit for yourself, so go there immediately after our meeting ends. You and Kim have a lot to discuss, so find a quiet place and talk. I didn't anger him at that moment and took Kim with me to the tailor to try on a suit. After that, I took her to my home to discuss all the issues. Kim, have you read the contract? What do you think of him? Yes, I'm not happy with some points, but I understand that you need to protect yourself, so I'm ready to put up with it. I know it's far from ideal, but in the end, we both get what we want. I can start my business faster, and you will maintain your reputation and be able to marry the father of your child. I promise to treat you fairly and with respect if you do the same. We didn't meet again until our wedding day. Kim looked great and Scott's tailor made me look good too. The wedding took place as expected, in compliance with all traditions. All the guests were from her side. I didn't know anyone. I noticed that some were casting contemptuous glances at me, as if wondering what she saw in him. We, of course, had to open the dances. Scott stated, "I don't think you can dance, so I'm going to apologize to you and take my daughter out on the dance floor." "That's not necessary," I replied. I took Kim by the hand and led her to the dance floor. I was not Fred Astaire, but I could well show my class. We started with a waltz, then danced a foxtrot, and in total we danced 6 tunes together. I noticed Scott standing at the edge of the crowd trying to intervene to dance with his daughter, but since his wife, Martha, had no intention of dancing with me, I decided to ignore him. When we finally left the dance floor, Kim was out of breath and in need of a rest, and I went to get drinks. When I returned, she and her father were arguing about something. When they saw me, they fell silent. I handed Kim her drink and asked, "What were you talking about?" Dad was angry that I didn't dance with him right away. He said I looked like I was having fun and reminded me that it was just a sham marriage and to keep that in mind. I reminded him that for the marriage to be legal, it would need to be consummated. He seemed to almost burst out at that moment, but then he turned red and walked away. You understand, I just wanted to make him angry. I didn't mean it. Of course not. This would be against the contract. Just tell him nothing happened to calm him down. Yes, but I'll keep it tense a little longer. Anyway, I'm having a really good time no matter who knows, not even my boyfriend. These words stung me a little, but I immediately reminded myself that Kim would never be mine. If he weren't so focused on his career, he would be next to me now, not you. No offense. No hard feelings. I'm having a good time too. I haven't danced like this for a long time. We sat for a while, drinking our drinks, then Kim stood up and said, "I should probably go dance with Dad, otherwise I'll continue to hear his complaints for a long time." I just smiled and relaxed. As she walked away, her maid of honor came up to me and asked me to dance. I took her hand and we joined the crowd on the dance floor. While we were dancing, I noticed that Kim was looking at us, and there was no smile on her face. What could this mean? Soon the presenter announced into the microphone, "Ladies and gentlemen, let us applaud as we see off our young couple on their honeymoon." To the applause of the guests, we held hands and walked out to the limousine, accompanied by shouts and jokes. The limousine took us to my house since I was not allowed to enter Scott's mansion. We changed and headed to the airport to head to Hawaii for a week on our honeymoon arranged by Scott. I'm sure he almost suffocated with anger paying for this honeymoon. We checked into the presidential suite rather than the bridal suite as it had 2 bedrooms. We unpacked our things in separate rooms and got ready for dinner. I wondered if Scott had installed cameras to see if we were breaking the contract. Outside the hotel, we behaved like newlyweds, but slept in separate rooms at night. The week was wonderful. We visited all the local attractions. On our last night, we were sitting on a swing by the hotel pool when Kim put her head on my shoulder and whispered, "It's a pity that we have to return home tomorrow. I wish this could go on forever." I replied, "Me too." And I was surprised to realize that I said this sincerely. When we returned home, we went straight to my house, since our new house was not yet ready and needed a few more weeks to complete its preparation. I invited Kim to take the master bedroom with a private bath, while I settled in one of the bedrooms on the top floor. The first day after returning, I was awakened by the smell of frying bacon. I took a shower, got ready for work. I worked as an instructor at the gym and went downstairs. When I saw Kim in the kitchen, I said, "It smells delicious, but I didn't expect you to cook for me. This was not part of the deal." "Everything is fine. I love to cook. I just rarely get the opportunity. Sit down, breakfast is almost ready." I sat down at the table and she served me bacon and eggs on waffles with biscuits on the side. I didn't have the heart to tell her that my typical breakfast was much more, because as a weightlifter I need to consume between 4 and 6,000 calories a day, mostly protein. I decided to stop for lunch later at a trucker cafe and fill myself up there, although I grabbed a protein drink from the refrigerator before heading out. When I arrived at work, my colleagues started making fun of me about the honeymoon, but things soon died down. I asked Phil to spare some time for me, and we went to his office. "What's on your mind, Jay?" he asked. "Phil, I know you said you wanted to sell the gym and move to Florida. Are you serious? Why did you win the lottery?" "Not really, but I got some money and I want to know how much you want for the gym." In fact, I was already in negotiations with one buyer, and he made me an offer. If you can beat him, the gym is yours. How much did he offer? The amount is $300,000, all-inclusive. This includes a building that consists of 30 apartments. Isn't it too cheap? Usually yes, but most of the apartments are empty, and the ones that are occupied are rented under the Fair Rent Act, so I can't charge the tenants full price, and I can't evict them. Their rent does not even cover maintenance costs, so the building is gradually falling into disrepair. Are you still interested? I didn't know you owned the entire building. Give me a couple of days to think about it, and I'll tell you by Friday, okay? Yes, but not later. I spent the rest of the day at the gym working and training. When I got home, Kim cooked a roast with potatoes and all the trimmings. I had already had a bite to eat at the cafe, but I didn't tell her about it. She really tried to do everything right. I thought that if she continued to try so hard, I would have to reconsider my diet. We spent the evening watching TV and talking, getting to know each other better. I told her my life story, and she shared hers. She painted a picture of how her father had always controlled her life. It was he who introduced her to her boyfriend. Her boyfriend was a lawyer and worked for a large New York law firm owned by his father. His father demanded that he climb the career ladder gradually and expected that in 5 years the guy would become senior vice president, and then he could marry Kim. When the program we were watching ended, we went to bed. I had to be fresh-headed for tomorrow because I had a meeting with a potential sponsor. In the morning, I got up and left before Kim woke up. I left her a note saying I had an early start but would be back later. I was meeting with a possible sponsor, Bill Swan, whose company made exercise equipment, primarily for gyms, and he wanted me to endorse his products and put my photo on the product packaging. Of course, it wasn't as lucrative as football or baseball sponsorships, but it still promised a decent amount of money in the mid-five figures range. My 5-time state weightlifting championship made me quite famous, and sports equipment companies wanted to take advantage of my success. I took Bill's proposal and submitted it to my lawyer for review. On the way back, I left the documents with the lawyer's secretary since he himself was not there. I also started preparing an offer for Phil to buy the gym and building from him. I planned to pay him $200,000 up front and the remainder over 5 years with interest. On Friday, I presented my proposal to Phil. He expressed interest but said his lawyer would have to look at the documents first. That same day, my lawyer, Mike Grayson, called and said that I could safely sign a contract with a sponsor. I called Bill and told him the good news, to which he replied that he would arrange a photo shoot and get back to me. The next few weeks were tense, and I rarely saw Kim. I left early and returned home when she was already asleep. The photo shoot took longer than I expected, but finally everything was ready and products with my image should be on the shelves within a month. Phil came back to me with the news. His lawyer approved my proposal. I had to sign the contract with his lawyer on Monday morning. That same day, Phil gathered the entire staff at the gym and announced the change of ownership. Everyone congratulated me, someone patted me on the shoulder, and I thought I saw a tear in Phil's eyes, but he looked happy. I wanted to make some improvements to the gym, but first I had to deal with the tenants who were protected by the Fair Rent Act. I spent the entire weekend in my home office thinking about a solution to this problem. Kim had gone to her parents' place, probably to spend time with her boyfriend, which was basically part of our contract, and I didn't expect her to return until Monday afternoon. By Sunday evening, I had a plan, but its implementation required the consent of all residents. On Monday, I contacted a local tenants' rights agency and set up an appointment for Wednesday. I devoted the rest of the day to training, since recently, taking into account all the events, I have neglected my physical training a little. When I got home, Kim was sitting on the couch, clearly nervous. "Jay, are you mad at me?" she asked. "No, why do you think that?" I answered. "Well, you seem to be avoiding me lately. You leave when I'm still sleeping and come back when I'm already in bed. It seems like you're avoiding me." "Kim, I have a lot to do at work right now. Sorry if I seem distracted, but it won't be for long, I promise." "Jay, the thing is, as a couple, we need to interact with people, go out together. And I'm stuck at home because I don't want my friends to see me alone, like I'm lonely. If we're going to keep up the appearance of this marriage, we need to appear in public together more often. Is it that difficult?" I saw that she was upset. There were tears in her eyes. I couldn't resist the crying woman, so I immediately hugged her, trying to console her. "Sorry, Kim, I wasn't thinking. You're right, of course, and no, it's not at all difficult for me to go out with you. I would be proud to take you anywhere, just say the word." I suddenly realized that she was hugging me too, and I felt awkward. I pulled away from our hug and asked where she would like to go. "Do you want to go to dinner with me on Friday, and then maybe dance? You dance beautifully, you know." After our conversation, she looked much more cheerful and even hummed to herself when she went to bed. On Wednesday, I went to meet with Rental Inspector Mary Goodnight, a middle-aged woman in a sharp suit. She led me into her office and sat down at the table. "Well, Mr. Price, what do you need? Before we begin, I must warn you that our conversation is being recorded. This is for your safety and mine. Are you okay with this?" "I'm quite happy with that." "Okay, now that we've cleared that up, what exactly can I do for you?" "You may have already heard that I bought a gym in Arlington and also own a building with apartments that house rent-protected tenants. As you probably know, their rent doesn't even cover maintenance costs. I understand your situation, but the law is the law, and I'm afraid I can't help you. If everything remains as is, the building will become uninhabitable in a couple of years. What will happen then? Is that a threat, Mr. Price?" "No way. I have a solution that benefits both the tenants and me." "Okay, Mr. Price, what's on your mind?" "The building has 6 apartments occupied by rent-protected tenants. They were the only residents left. This leaves 24 empty apartments. Tenants are dispersed throughout the building, but no apartments are on the ground floor. I thought that if I renovated the 6 apartments on the first 2 floors and the tenants moved into them on the same terms, I could renovate the remaining apartments to an improved standard and rent them out at a profit. This will allow me to keep the building in good condition and everyone will be happy. How do you like this idea? It sounds good, but for it to work, all tenants have to agree to the idea. I understand this, and this is where you can help. If we can arrange a meeting with the tenants, I could lay out my proposal to them and, with your approval, we have a chance of success." I'll have to discuss this with my bosses, but it sounds like a plan. Leave this to me and I will contact you. I left the office feeling more optimistic than when I entered and went straight to the hall. Remembering what Kim said, I returned home just after 6. Oh, Jay, I'm so sorry. I didn't expect you to be back so early. I haven't cooked anything for dinner yet. It's okay. Let's go out for dinner. Nothing special. You choose while I change. I need to change too. I can't go outside in this, and my hair is terrible. Tell you what, I'll choose a place for tonight, and you choose something for Friday, something decent, with dancing, okay? And you don't have to change your clothes, just put your hair in a ponytail, and you'll look right at home. I quickly went upstairs, took a shower, and changed into jeans and cowboy boots with a plaid shirt. When I went downstairs, Kim was already waiting for me. She looked very comfortable, not at all like the rich girl she was. We went outside and Kim, as usual, headed to her Mercedes. Not this time, Kim. Your Mercedes will look out of place where we're going. We'll use it on Friday. I opened the passenger door of my old truck, and she got in. Where are we going? You will see. The food is great, and the company is first class. When I pulled up to the Ranch House gas station, she looked puzzled. It's okay. During the day, it's a regular gas station, and at night, it's a Western bar and grill with dancing, but not the kind you're used to. Come on, I guarantee you'll like it. We walked inside and Kaz, the owner of the place, saw me and came over. I haven't seen you for a long time, Jay. How are you doing? And who is this nice lady? Sorry, I was busy. And this is Kim, my wife. Kim, this is Kaz. She owns this place, and it's the best Western bar in the state. Hello, honey. How did you manage to lasso Jay? I thought he would remain a bachelor for life. Every time I tried to set him up with someone, he refused. We need to talk to you sometime. She then showed us a booth overlooking the dance floor and a 4-piece band playing there. Several couples moved slowly around the dance floor, not so much dancing as just hugging each other and moving to the music. Kim looked as excited as a kid in a toy store. Kaz brought us the menu and asked what we would drink. I looked at Kim and said, 2 beers, a non-alcoholic one for me, I'm driving. As we sat and looked at the menu, Kaz brought us beer, but no glasses. Kim looked at me strangely and then at the bottles, as if asking why there were no glasses. I simply pointed at those around me, and Kim realized that no one was using glasses. I picked up my bottle and motioned for Kim to do the same, then I touched her bottle and said, "For you, baby, and let's be healthy." Kim had never been to a restaurant like this, and the menu was completely new to her, so she asked what was good about it. I ordered the ribs special with fries and chicken wings for both of us. When the food arrived, Kim's eyes widened in surprise. I'll never be able to eat it all. Don't worry, I'll finish whatever you don't want. She took a knife and fork and tried to tear the meat from the ribs. No, not like that. Use your fingers and a fork for the potatoes and a napkin to wipe your fingers. We sat and ate and didn't talk about anything, and it was clear from the expression on Kim's face that she was thoroughly enjoying herself. When she was full, she pushed her plate towards me so I could finish the rest. It was amazing. Please say you will bring me here again. Anytime, but you better join the gym. It's a very high-calorie meal, and your boyfriend might not approve of me fattening you up. She suddenly became sad and went to the ladies' room. When she returned, her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. I decided it was better to remain silent and said nothing. The music stopped, and the leader of the group announced a line dance, to which everyone applauded. I stood up and took Kim's hand and led her to the end of the line. She looked puzzled, and I said, "Just follow everyone, and you will succeed." 20 minutes later, she looked like she'd been doing this her whole life and seemed to be thoroughly enjoying herself. The band took a break, and we sat down to listen to some music from the jukebox while they relaxed. After a while, a slow melody started playing, and a man I didn't know approached us. "Excuse me, sir, do you mind if I ask your lady to dance?" "Thank you for asking. Yes, you can. but the decision is hers. He asked Kim if she wanted to dance. She looked at me, and I nodded in agreement. They went out on the dance floor and did a couple of numbers before he brought her back and thanked us both. Kim looked confused. So this is how you should ask another man's woman to dance if you don't want to get your head smashed. Never interfere if she is married, and always accept refusal with respect. Everyone here knows the rules of good manners and follows them. We danced a couple more times and left around 11. When we got home and said goodbye, Kim kissed me on the cheek and said, "I had a great evening. Thank you very much. I haven't had this much fun for a long time." After that, we went to our rooms. In the morning, I went down to breakfast, and this time there were mountains of eggs, bacon, waffles, pancakes, and syrup waiting for me. I looked at Kim, and she laughed. "After how much you ate last night, I realized that a body like yours needs more nutrition, so I searched the internet, and this is the result." Kim, you are simply amazing. I have to go to work this morning, but I'll try to be back by lunchtime. Jay, you said last night that I needed to go to the gym. Were you serious? Well, I was joking, but if you continue to eat like you did yesterday, yes, you will have to work out. Although I'm not sure if you can exercise while pregnant. Oh, I didn't think about that. I should probably talk to my doctor. But since we're talking about this, I have a favor to ask of you. Ask for whatever you want, honey, I said, imitating John Wayne. Jay, I know this is a big ask, but could you come with me to my Lamaze class? Other husbands will be there, so you won't feel out of place. Kim, I would be honored to go to class with you. Just tell me when and where. She threw herself on my neck and hugged me. Thank you so much. I didn't want to be the only one who didn't have a husband in the course. Kim spent Saturday and Sunday at her parents' house, so I could do whatever I wanted. I slept until 10, then went to the gym for a couple of hours. I couldn't calm down and realized that I was used to having someone nearby and felt lonely. Damn, this was harder than I thought. I already missed Kim. We weren't intimate, and we weren't truly married, so what was my problem? I even felt jealous that Kim might have slept with her boyfriend while I sat here feeling sorry for myself. I needed to release my frustrations. I remembered that one of the guys in the gym said that he relieves stress by participating in MMA fights and beating up someone. He also said that sometimes he himself got hit in the neck, but the result was the same. I was a strong guy. I boxed, wrestled, and sparred MMA in the gym. I liked MMA because, like boxing, you could hit as hard as you could and get hit back. I only survived due to my strength and size. I could take hits due to my muscular build. I went online to see if there were any fights for this weekend. I was lucky. In 30 miles, there was going to be an open competition where everyone was welcome. If I left now, I would be in time for registration. I gathered my equipment, which was not necessary, since the fighters there were in ordinary street clothes, jumped into the truck and hit the road. I arrived on time and joined the check-in line. When they asked me my name, I gave my real name, but was told that I needed to come up with a nickname. I picked the title Missing Link out of thin air. I was then offered a mask to disguise myself, which I accepted. I was taken to the locker room to wait to be called. There, another member offered to help me put on the mask since it tied at the back. I decided I didn't want to ruin my clothes, so I changed into a black leotard I found in my locker. I left my clothes and personal items in the locker and received a key with a number. When it was my turn, I handed the key to the host for safekeeping. He asked my name and announced me as the Missing Link. He introduced the other fighter as the Great Godzilla. The fight was supposed to take place in a cage, and we entered from opposite sides. Obviously, it was a fight without rules, but I won. It turned out that he was the champion of this establishment. I didn't know it then. Management saved the newcomer for the last fight so that the champion could beat them for the entertainment of the crowd. Silence reigned in the room. The host entered the cage and declared me the winner. The crowd erupted in cheers, chanting "Missing Link" over and over again. I was escorted back to the locker rooms and told to leave as quickly as possible as the losers of the illegal bets might come after me. The presenter handed me the prize money, a percentage of the proceeds for the evening, and let me out through the back door. I was glad I wore a mask because I didn't want there to be any consequences. When I returned home, I began to feel the physical effects of the fight and my frustrations disappeared. It worked, but I was sore all over. The next morning I felt even worse. I took a bath, added Epsom salts to the water, and soaked for a long time. The water had almost cooled down when I came out. I tidied up the bath, wrapped myself in a towel, and went to get some coffee. As I walked out of the kitchen, holding a towel and a cup of coffee, the front door opened and Kim walked into the house. She looked at my face, dropped her bag, and ran towards me. "Jay, what happened to you? Did you have an accident?" I didn't want to tell her the truth, so I told her that I was boxing at the gym and got hit with a right hand. She went to the freezer, took out some ice, wrapped it in a kitchen towel, and pressed it to my face. "Hold this." She took my towel hand, placed it on the ice pack, then made me sit on the couch. I had an ice pack in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other, and as I sat down, the towel wrapped around my waist unfurled, exposing my body. Kim couldn't help but look, and then looked again when I tried to cover myself. She covered her face with her hands and muttered, "Oh, God." Then she turned beet red and ran to her room. I sat there like a complete idiot. After a while, I went to my room and changed into something less revealing. When I returned, Kim was sitting with a cup of coffee, but looking at me, she blushed again and began to get up. "Kim, please don't be embarrassed. Forgive me, it's not your fault. What you saw cannot be forgotten, so just try to forget it happened, please." She looked at me and smiled. "I'm sorry too, I shouldn't have looked, but everything is fine with you there, and any woman would be happy to be with you. But I don't regret watching it, and I will always remember it." Now it was my turn to blush, and I could feel it slowly creeping up my face. To change the subject, I asked, "How was your weekend?" "Not good." David, that's his name, looked at my stomach and said I was getting fat. I explained that it was because of the baby, but he was only interested in whether my previous appearance would return after giving birth. I said that I would have to work out to get my figure back, and he said the sooner the better. He returned to New York immediately after dinner. He doesn't seem to like my new look. And then she started crying. I picked her up and held her, saying, "Kim, I think pregnant women are the most beautiful women in the world. They glow, and you should be proud of your little bump. When I am with you, even though the child is not mine, I am so proud of you. In my opinion, you have never looked more beautiful than now, so don't pay attention to him. He doesn't deserve you." She stopped crying and just hugged me. "Kim, do me a favor and take me to work. I can't drive with one eye closed." "No problem. Let me change into some jeans and I'll be right there." She took me to the gym and I invited her in and introduced her to some guys. I received a lot of good-natured ridicule about my eye, and it was suggested that Kim had hit me for my bad behavior. Kim thought it was funny. She ended up staying the day and insisted on treating everyone to lunch. When she went to the grocery store to get substitutes for everyone, I sent one of my guys with her to help carry them back, and besides, it can be a bit of a rough neighborhood. We all sat around munching and drinking protein drinks. When my phone rang, it was Mary Goodnight from the Fair Rent office. She said she spoke with her boss, who thought it was a good idea and that it should come to fruition. She said she would contact tenants to make an appointment for Wednesday at 6 p.m. and would meet her at her office at that time. When I went to her office, she seemed very optimistic about the idea and said that her bosses were looking forward to the outcome. If it worked, they would encourage other homeowners to do the same, which would make their job much easier. When the tenants arrived and introduced themselves to me as their new landlord, they stared at me. We all went into the conference room and took our seats, and, much to my surprise, we were offered coffee and cakes. Once we had all calmed down, Mary opened the door and introduced Rex Vanden, the council's lawyer, then stood up and knocked on the table. "I ask for your attention, ladies and gentlemen. The folders I am about to distribute contain an offer from Mr. Price, your landlord. Before you read it, I must tell you that it has been reviewed by Mr. Vanden, our corporate attorney, who believes it deserves your serious consideration. Now please read the document, and after you have all read it, Mr. Price will answer any questions." Then she smiled at me and sat down. I was a little shocked because I thought we were just going to have an informal discussion. It appears that local authorities were keen to implement this as quickly as possible. Then the price dropped, and the mayor and some of his council were up for re-election later this year. If successful, it will be a feather in his and his administration's cap. Now I was a political pawn. After thinking about it, I realized that this could work in my favor. I was confident that any work permits would receive favorable advice and be expedited to completion before the election. After a reasonable amount of time had passed, Mary resumed the meeting and asked if there were any questions. There were a few minor issues, mostly related to moving costs and redecoration. One of the questions asked was whether the rent fair office supported the lawsuit. I was surprised when Maria said that this was approved at the highest level. I stood and tried to reassure the tenants in my desire to provide them with better housing. I even went so far as to let them select kitchen equipment, including appliances, from the builder's catalog. I also offered them a $1,000 incentive to buy new upholstered furniture. With no further questions, Mary ended the meeting with the following statement. "Keep in mind that in order for this to happen, you will all have to agree to Mr. Price's proposal. If even one of you says no, things won't go any further. You will have to live as you are, with minimal maintenance, and the certainty that someday the building will be declared unsafe and you will be relocated. I strongly encourage you to accept this generous offer and vote yes. We will meet here later. The date has not yet been decided. Please have a safe journey home, and I look forward to our next meeting." When they all left, Mary turned to me and said, "I think it went pretty well, and your offer of choosing a kitchen and a $1K allowance for upholstered furniture was brilliant. I think this might sway dissenters to your side. I am optimistic about the result. I'll make another appointment for 2 weeks and hope for the best." When I returned home, Kim asked me for a meeting, and I explained my problem and its promising solution. She said she was impressed and wished me luck. The next weekend, Kim left and said David wouldn't be there, but for some reason Dad wanted her to be home. When she returned on Sunday evening, she seemed very excited, and when I asked her about it, she showed me some keys. "Dad says the house is ready to move in when we pick out the furniture. Isn't that interesting?" I wasn't so sure about it. I loved living in my house with Kim. It was my domain, and Scott would never stoop to visiting us here. But I caught Kim's excitement and pretended to be pleased with her news. I expected Kim to make all the decisions about furnishing our new home. I couldn't yet think of it as a home, but she surprised me by insisting that we choose together, like a real couple. "You're going to live there with me for at least 5 years, aren't you?" I saw her logic and participated in choosing everything from the curtains to the color of the bath towels. The only room I made a full selection for was the home office, which I would be using alone. I also insisted that it be equipped with a lock that only I could use, just like the safe in my office. Kim would like the same thing as a safe in her bedroom. There was already a lock on her bedroom door. I also installed one on my bedroom door. I didn't trust Scott, so the next time Kim visited her parents for the weekend, I had a security company scan my new home for bugs. They found cameras and listening devices in all the bedrooms, the living room, the kitchen, and even one in my bathroom. They were placed in the garage, in the garden, and by the pool. I removed the ones in my bedroom, bathroom, pool area, living room, and kitchen. I left the rest in place because they did not invade my privacy and were a good security measure. I packed up the ones I took off and sent them to Kim's father with a note. Excess of requirement. When Kim returned, I told her what I had done and suggested that she check her bedroom and bathroom for bugs. I gave her a small box that beeped when it was near an electrical device. When she came downstairs, she was furious and swore at her father. "You installed cameras in my bedroom and bathroom to spy on me. I can't believe you did this to your own daughter. I will have them removed, and if you ever do anything like that again, I will go to the police and press charges." Then she sat down and cried, muttering curses at her father. I sat with her until she calmed down and then made us coffee. She said that although David was there and they slept in the same bed, he was not interested in sex. Over the next few months, Kim became the size of a house and was very conscious of her figure, not wanting to go out and be seen. I thought she looked great and told her so. I always think pregnant women glow and look better than usual. I went to Lama's classes with her. During this time, other events happened in my life. I won the state weightlifting title for the 5th time in a row. This meant more sponsorship and more money. I was named in the top 3 to win the national title. Let me make a point here. Weightlifting is a little-known sport with only a minority of followers. It never seems to be known unless we win an international title and then quickly forget. So, no Hall of Fame and no national recognition. If you weren't interested in the sport, you probably would never have heard of me. However, if you walk into a sports store and look at the selection of energy drinks and nutritional supplements, you will almost certainly see a photo of me with weights and medals around my neck on some of them. Another milestone in my life was the renovation of my apartment building and recognition from local authorities. It looks like my home and gym renovations have brought money to the middle class and will help rejuvenate the area. I was even asked to give a lecture on how to change the fate of a depressed area. After the lecture, a large gentleman approached me and asked me to follow him, which I did. I was taken to the governor's suite and introduced. Mr. Price, or can I call you James? Governor, please call me Jay, as most people do. What can I do for you? Jay, I attended your lecture and found your approach not only innovative but inspiring. I hope others will follow your example and stop trying to make a quick buck at the expense of the poor. Not only that, I'm a big fan of yours. Not many people know that I lifted weights in college and won a couple of titles. I look forward to seeing you at the national championships. He then shook my hand, and the interview ended as he turned his attention to more pressing matters. She looked young enough to be his daughter, but she was over 18 years old. I wondered for a moment if his wife knew, then walked away. My business was growing, my rental income was skyrocketing, and I was in negotiations to purchase another gym. In the evening, Kim and I had dinner, watched TV, and talked about how our day went. It was like marriage, but without sex. I got it from professional women far from home. One night, there was a knock on my bedroom door. Jay, my water just broke. I got dressed, grabbed my travel bag, and took her to the hospital, and they took her straight to the birth. I was sort of taken with her before I could escape. Kim held my hand and screamed in pain. The nurses asked if I was her husband, and of course I said yes. They assumed that I wanted to witness the birth and dressed me in a green dress. I was panicking. I looked at Kim for a way out, but she just squeezed my hand and said, "Please stay, I need you." So I did it, and it was the most wonderful experience of my life. When they gave me the baby, we both cried. They then asked me to leave so they could clean everything up. When I called the Scott house, Martha answered, "Mrs. Scott, you are the grandmother of a 7 pounds 6 ounces boy. Congratulations." I heard her crying on the phone. "When can we come?" "Well, she's very tired now, so maybe tomorrow morning. Call the maternity ward to find out visiting times." At that moment, they called me to say goodnight to Kim, so I ended the call. Things got crazy over the next few days. I made sure the nursery was ready and went out and bought all the blue blankets and sheets for his crib. One afternoon, I came home and was greeted by her father, accompanied by a middle-aged woman. She was supposed to become a nanny and move into her mother-in-law's apartment above the garage. She seemed like a nice woman and was polite to me. She knew about the agreement between me and the Scotts. I was told not to visit Kim. Dad would take care of everything. And so he did. Everything I bought was thrown away, and her mother replaced everything. I was furious, and Martha saw it. When we were alone, she apologized for her husband's behavior. She said she took the things I bought out of trash bags, and they stayed in my bedroom to be used later when he left. They kept Kim in the hospital for a week because she had complications, and they didn't want her to leave too soon. I was sitting and working in my home office when the phone rang. It was Kim. "Jay, I'm ready to come home. Will you pick me up before my father finds out and beats you to it?" I grabbed Kim's car keys and drove to the hospital. I went up to her room, and the nurse wheeled her out, holding little Darren, who was named after her boyfriend's father. I strapped him into the crib, then strapped Kim in and took them both home. When we got home, the nanny Pauline Bland, whom her father had hired, came out and took little Darren, and I helped Kim into the house. She went straight to the bedroom to change into more comfortable clothes. After Kim removed all the surveillance equipment her father had installed, I installed my own system. I didn't trust her father, so the cameras showed the hallway leading to her downstairs bedroom, as well as the upstairs hallway showing the entire bedroom. Doors. The living room, family room, dining room, and kitchen were also covered. It was all connected to my phone, and I could call up any camera whenever I wanted. The entire system is uploaded to the cloud for storage. When Scott arrived at the hospital and found that we had already left, he was furious and came straight to our house. I opened the door. I did not give him the key, although I gave it to Martha on the condition that she would not give it to her husband, and he started shouting that I had no right to take my grandson from the hospital. I went and took the birth certificate and pointed to the place where it said "Father" and my name. I thought he might have a heart attack right in front of me, and when he tried to walk past me, I stood my ground. He stood there and for the first time realized that I had all the cards in my hands. If he wanted to see his daughter or grandson, he would have to behave. I just looked into his eyes until he looked down and asked if he would see his grandson. I moved away from him and motioned for him and Martha to come into the living room. Kim entered the room, changed into sweatpants and a sweatshirt, walked over and hugged her parents. Then we all sat down and Pauline brought little Darren. They all hugged, and then Miss Bland took him away for a nap. I got up, made coffee for everyone, and served it to them while they were talking. I realized that I had no requirements and went to my office to work. I heard their car drive away and walked into the living room. Kim was looking at all the baby clothes we had bought, and I saw a tear roll down her face. "What happened, Kim? I thought you were going to be happy." That was until my father said David didn't want to see the baby yet. "He's probably just busy and can't come right now." He didn't even call me at the hospital to see how we were doing. I didn't talk to him for several weeks. I think he was only dating me to get to my father, and the child is a nuisance. Then she burst into tears and threw herself into my arms. She thanked me and said she was tired and went to her room. Miss Bland made it clear that she was here for the child and not to take care of us, and she said this while looking directly at me. Realizing that if I wanted to eat, I would have to take care of it myself, I went to our local diner. I ordered a double portion of everything and 2 mugs of coffee, felt full, and returned home. Kim started going to the gym again to get rid of her post-baby belly and loved her enlarged milk-filled breasts. Several times I walked into the living room and saw her feeding Darren. In such cases, I turned around and quickly left. She never mentioned it, but sometimes she gave me a sly smile and continued to feed the baby. Sometimes I saw women in public places feeding their children. I tried not to look, but it was the most charming sight I had ever seen. There was nothing sexual about it. It was a gesture of love, as natural as the sun rising. Over time, as Kim's body returned to normal size, she began to spend more weekends at her parents' house. One evening, returning home, she was all happy and practically fluttered into the living room. I asked her what happened, and she said David stayed the night and they started having sex again. I said I was happy for her, and I really was, because this is what I signed up for. She said David was very busy and would only be able to see her once every 2 weeks, so could we start going out together again? I agreed, and from then on we started going on dates, going to line dances at the ranch house, having dinner at various clubs where we danced. I was happy. I had a beautiful woman on my arm, and she was happy to go out with me without burdening herself with obligations. I have already said that sex was not the main motivator for me. 2 or 3 times a month was enough for me. Over the next 2 years, things remained pretty much the same, except that Kim went on a 2-week vacation with David and came back exhausted from all the traveling. My business grew, and I now owned 3 gyms and 2 apartment complexes, so money was not an issue. I set aside enough money in a separate account to pay Scott back for his original payment in case something went wrong. I saw no reason why this had to happen, but I felt better knowing that I was ready. On the athletic side, I was now a national champion in weightlifting in my category and represented the United States in international competitions. There was one incident that shook me on a personal level and had nothing to do with my relationship with Kim. I haven't had anything to do with my parents or siblings since I left home, so I was surprised when my sister asked me to meet her. At her insistence, we met at my lawyer's office, where she told me the shocking news. My father suffered a heart attack 18 months ago, and after surgery he was told he would have to take care of himself. With my father out of the game, my idiot brother took over the company and bankrupted it in a little over a year. The company that my father had built from 0 to 100 employees was on the verge of bankruptcy. In an attempt to save the situation, the parents mortgaged their house and gave the money to Frank to refinance the company. Frank blew the money on a new car and pointless deals. His parents, unable to pay the mortgage on their house, sold it and were now living in a nursing home. Sarah was studying to be a nurse and worked at a local hospital, but she couldn't help them much with her salary. Frank was still living a luxurious life, destroying the company, which was now barely staying afloat. It became clear why Sarah insisted on meeting at my lawyer's office when she said she knew about my 30% ownership of the company. She owned 10%, Frank owned 10%, and had voting power by proxy for her parents, with the remaining 50%. She suggested that we go to my parents with my lawyer and try to convince them to give us voting rights to save the company. I agreed, and we made an appointment for Friday. On the way home, something happened that changed me forever. I was driving on the highway when traffic came to a complete stop. The patrolman walked along a row of stationary cars and talked to the drivers. When he approached me, he said there was a multi-vehicle accident about a half-mile ahead, and it would take time to clear it. I knew the area well and knew there was a highway exit up ahead that would take me through a doldrums area I hadn't driven through in years, but it would be faster than standing here. I told the patrolman about my idea, and he allowed me to drive along the side of the road, passing the cars in front. As I approached the outskirts of the city, I suddenly realized how depressing it had become. Burnt-out cars stood in the courtyards of closed businesses. Half the shops were closed, and the homeless were grouped around barrels of burning garbage. As I was past the worst part and entering a slightly better area, I saw a woman and 2 children standing among the furniture laid out on the sidewalk. As I drove by, I saw that the children were crying, holding on to their mother, as if they were afraid that she might disappear at any moment. Like I said, I have a thing for women in distress, so I stopped and backed up. "Sorry, madam, I know it's none of my business, but is there anything I can do to help?" She looked at me like I was crazy. "Why does this concern you?" "I just want to offer help. Is this furniture yours? If so, I can help move her and give you a ride. We have nowhere to go, our landlord has evicted us, and I don't know what to do. My husband left us last week and hasn't been back since, so if you don't have a magic wand you can wave and make everything go away, go to hell. Do you want my help or not? Before you answer, think about your children and their needs rather than feeling sorry for yourself. If you refuse my help, I will call Child Protective Services and report that the children are in danger, and you know what that means. So I ask you again, will you accept my help or not? How do I know that you can be trusted? Maybe you're a serial killer." Fair point. Do you have a phone? Is there someone you can trust? Someone you can call? Yes, my sister Pauline, but my phone doesn't work. It's not a problem. Use my phone, call her, and tell her you are going to stay with me until you can sort out your situation. Take a picture of me and my driver's license. I'll stand next to you in front of my truck, and tell her to call the police if you don't contact her every day. Will it do? Then I saw a police car moving down the street. I stopped him and explained the situation. He was skeptical at first, but after looking at my driver's license, he recognized me as he was a member of one of my gyms. He took photographs and sent them to her sister, which included himself. Her sister seemed relieved to know that there was someone helping her sister, and they talked for a while. While they were talking, the patrolman helped me load her furniture into my truck. We said goodbye, and I was about to leave when the younger girl asked when dinner would be. Her mother said she would have to wait a little. I realized that they probably hadn't eaten for a long time, so I stopped at McDonald's and parked. Look, I don't even know your names. I can't call you madam, so if you introduce yourself, I'll be grateful. Mother looked at me as if I had asked her something inappropriate. Then her gaze softened, and she said, "My name is Wendy, and these are my daughters. Karen, she's 13, and Kirsty, she's 11. The girls held each other tightly, as if their lives depended on it. I extended my hand to Wendy. "Hi, my name is James Price, but my friends call me Jay." "I'll call you Jay, but the girls will call you Mr. Price, if that's okay." "Well, now that we've officially met, how about we get something to eat? I'm starving." Without waiting for an answer, I simply got out of the truck and opened the back door. The girls ran out in a flash with big smiles on their faces, and Mom followed them. We went to the order board, and I told them they could order whatever they wanted. After eating and returning to the truck, both girls thanked me. They looked full, and considering how much they ate, you'd think they were training for a weightlifting competition. I took them to my aunt's house. When they saw how much space they would have, their eyes became very big. I took them upstairs and showed them their bedrooms. The girls insisted on sharing a room, and Mom agreed. We left them jumping on the bed, and I showed Wendy her room. I noticed that she looked at the doorknob, realizing that she was looking for the lock. "Listen, Wendy, I need to go out for a while, but I'll be back in an hour. The kitchen has drinks and snacks, but not much else. I'll stop by the store while I'm on the road. Before I go, maybe you could help me unload your things into the shed." 20 minutes later, I went to the supermarket with a shopping list that Wendy had helped me create. I also went to Lowe's DIY and purchased 2 locks. While I was on the road, I called Kim and said that I would be back late and would explain why later. I also bought Wendy a cheap prepaid phone with $50 credit. When I returned, Wendy had already made coffee, and the girls were watching the Disney Channel. Wendy still looked a little wary until I showed her the new locks for their bedrooms, at which point she began to relax. The girls finished watching their program, and Wendy told them to get ready for bed. I just finished installing the locks and handed Wendy the keys. When the girls left to change clothes, Wendy asked, "Jay, this is all very nice, but what do you want in return? I won't sleep with you if that's what you expect." "Wendy, you have nothing to be afraid of. I just want to do the right thing when I can. I'm going to make a call now, and I want you to listen." I called Kim and put her on speakerphone. I explained what I had done and asked Kim to reassure Wendy that I had no ulterior motives. Then I left them to talk like women while I went about putting away my shopping. When they stopped talking, I returned to the living room and gave Wendy the phone I had bought. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Jay, I'm so ashamed that I doubted you. Your wife said you're one of the good guys, and I believe her. Thank you so much for everything you have done. I can never repay you. You literally saved our lives." Then the girls went downstairs to say goodnight. Before going upstairs, they ran up to me, hugged me, and kissed me on the cheek. Then, laughing, they ran to bed. I asked Wendy if everything would be okay for the night, as I was going to go to Kim's house, but would be back tomorrow. When I returned home, Kim was already in bed, but she came out and kissed me on the cheek, saying, "You really are one of the good guys, you know. Some girl will be very lucky someday." The next day, I went to a car dealership, the owner of which went to one of my showrooms. I told him what I needed, and he showed several models within the amount I quoted. In the end, I settled on a nice Honda CR-V with low mileage. He said he would check it and deliver it the next day. I called Wendy and asked if everything was okay, and if it would be okay if I came over later. She said she and the girls would be welcome, and I said I'd bring ribs and salad for dinner, and she said that was a great idea. I spent the rest of the day in my home office. Kim said she was going away for a few days with David and that I shouldn't worry. At this point in our relationship, we were like roommates. I enjoyed her company. She was smart, witty, and funny. I knew I would miss her when she left to marry David. I just hoped he would treat her right. I did some work, then stopped at Costco for some ribs and salad, and called the bank to take care of one more thing. When I arrived at my aunt's house, the girls ran out to meet me. I wasn't sure if they were happy to see me or the ribs. Wendy made a mixed salad for the ribs and fries. After dinner, Wendy sent the girls out to play while we stayed to clear the table. Wendy made coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table to talk. Wendy, you said you had nowhere to go, so you can stay here as long as you want. Will that suit you? Jay, I love it here, but what about your wife? Will she be jealous even if there is nothing between us? Our situation is difficult. I told her about my agreement with Kim and how long it would last. She sat with disbelief on her face. If it makes you feel better, call her and talk about it, but do it now before she goes away for a few days with her boyfriend. I gave Wendy my phone and went outside to play ball with the girls. When I returned, Wendy said that Kim had confirmed my story and not to worry. Jay, if you don't mind, I'd love to stay here until I can sort out my situation, but it might take a while. I'm talking months, not weeks, so is the invitation still valid? Look, I don't live here. I come here when Kim is away, just to make the house look lived in. You'd do me a big favor if you looked after him instead of paying the rent. But if you're going to stay, you need to enroll the girls in the local school, and that requires a car. I didn't think about it. I don't have money for a car, let alone maintenance. I was hoping that we would have this conversation and come to this conclusion, so I have already agreed to buy the car, which will be delivered tomorrow. I hope you're not mad at me. I was just thinking about the girls. How can I be angry with you? After everything you've done for us, all I can do is say thank you. I would like to thank you somehow to show you how grateful we are. Well, there is one thing I would like you to do, and that is when Kim is away, cook a normal meal for me, because when I'm alone, I usually eat junk food. By the way, about food, you will need money for groceries, and the girls obviously could use some new things. Don't think I'm criticizing, but it wouldn't hurt for you to update your wardrobe either. No, you are already too generous. I'll find a job and buy clothes and everything else myself. Please, Wendy, it would be my pleasure to help you all until you can get back on your feet. I really want to do this. Please let me. You're right, of course, but I insist that I will have to pay you back when I can. So, we agreed. I made sure to get a credit card in your name with a limit of $10,000 in advance, so don't be afraid to use it. I handed her the card, and she burst into tears. I don't know what I did to deserve such a knight in shining armor, but I'm so glad you showed up and saved us. Over the next few months, I spent a lot of time with Wendy and her girls. It turned out she was a great cook, and I was in danger of becoming overweight. Oh yeah, about that meeting with the parents. We all sat in the common room since their apartment was too small to accommodate all of us, and Dad didn't want to come to the lawyer's office. We've laid out the hard truth. Frank is a complete idiot who is ruining his father's company. It took him some convincing, but he finally signed a power of attorney for me. Monday morning, I went to Frank's office with my lawyer, and it was great. At first, he arrogantly told me to get out, but when my lawyer showed him that I now had a controlling stake in the company, he gave in like a wet rag and even burst into tears. I told security to take him out of the building and called him a taxi because I had taken his car keys. I told him that he had 30 days to turn in the keys to the house since the house belonged to the company. I called a staff meeting, explained the changes in management, and set about saving the company from collapse. I purchased 2 old warehouse buildings on the outskirts of town and sent 2 crews of workers to transform them into a gym and middle-class apartments. So I was building my own client base. From now on, I will use my new company to renovate my acquisitions, creating jobs for my workforce. I also contacted some of our old clients who left us because of Frank's work ethic, such as using poor quality materials. I assured them that our work would return to the level it was under my father's management. Only time will tell if the measures I took will work. One evening, after the girls had gone to bed, Wendy and I were sitting on the back porch, sipping beer and discussing how we ended up in the circumstances we were in now. We sat in silence for a while longer, enjoying the sunset when I spoke. Wendy, I have an idea. Please let me finish before you say no. You wanted to become an accountant and you have a high school diploma. Why don't I pay you to go to a local college to get your qualifications? When you get your degree, you can find a much better job than waitressing and improve your life and the girls' lives. Would you do this for me, a person you barely know? Why not? I have more money than I need, and you could give it back to me if you insist. What do you say? Once again, I saved a lady in distress. Life went on as usual, but something interesting happened. Kim returned home after one of her days off, all inspired. Well, tell me, what got you so excited? Dad was invited to dinner in honor of the governor's victory, and he's taking me and Mom along. Kim, I never asked you for anything, but I want you to refuse your father's invitation. Kim looked upset. Cinderella, you will still go to the ball, but with me. Were you invited too? Yes, and I want you to tell your father that we will all go together. I'll even pay for everyone. I'll ask Dad, but his tickets are located closer to the governor's desk. Where are yours? Don't tell your father, but they're closer. So, 2 weeks later, the limousine picked us up, having previously picked up her father and mother. Scott didn't say a word the whole way. When we arrived, we joined the boarding line. Scott and I held our tickets and waited in line. When our time arrived, Scott handed his ticket to the maître d'hôtel, who called a waiter to escort Scott and Martha to their table. Scott said to wait as we were supposed to sit together. The maître d'hôtel asked to see my ticket. Unlike Scott's ticket, mine was embossed in gold and his was embossed in silver. The maître d'hôtel looked at Scott. I'm sorry, sir, but I'm afraid that's not possible. Your tickets don't match. Scott looked triumphant and grinned at me. You probably bought it online, and it's definitely a fake. The maître d'hôtel looked at Scott. No, sir, they're just different priorities. Still grinning at me. Ha, wherever you sit, I doubt you'll even see the governor. He took Martha's hand, and the waiter led them to their table, just 2 tables away from the governor's table. The smile never left his face. Kim looked depressed. Kim, don't be sad. Your father will soon learn the sad truth. The maître d'hôtel ordered one of his assistants to take his place and led us to our table. When Scott saw where they put us, I thought he was going to have a heart attack. We were seated at the governor's table, closer to his edge. I looked at Scott and waved at him. He blushed and ignored me, and Martha simply smiled and looked away. Once everyone was seated, the governor came out from behind the curtains, waving to the audience, and everyone stood up and applauded. When he sat down, the food began to be served, and the governor leaned towards me. James, who is this charming woman with you? I explained that it was my wife, and he raised his eyebrows. Well, you hit it. How long have you been married? For over 3 years now. When I said that, I remembered that I would be free in 2 years, and I felt a little sad. Kim and I got along great, and I will miss her. The rest of the evening passed quietly. The governor walked around the room shaking hands, as he called it, and there were presentations at the end of the event. 2 scholarships sponsored by the governor, a couple of awards to his staff for a job well done, and then to my horror, he called my name. I got up half-conscious and went to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, this year we have a new award, and I hope that it will be presented next year. This award recognizes a radical new approach to our town and city regeneration program. I introduce you to the entrepreneur who came up with this solution, James Price. He handed me a trophy. It was a glass figurine in the shape of an apartment building. Everyone applauded except Scott, who looked even redder, if that was even possible. I made a short speech, and I still don't remember what I said, but everyone applauded me as I left the stage. Kim looked so proud, as if we were truly married, and I felt a pang of regret. The drive home was silent, and Kim held my hand the entire way, much to Scott's annoyance. We dropped her parents off at their mansion and drove home. When we returned, Kim went upstairs to kiss Darren goodnight, and Miss Bland went to her apartment. I was sitting there waiting to say goodnight to Kim when she sat down next to me and started laughing. Jay, it was priceless. Dad didn't know what to do. He was so angry that he was just lost. You really tricked him this time, so be careful. He will try to take revenge sooner or later. But other than that, I don't remember the last time I had such a good time with someone. Then she kissed me on the cheek and went to bed. I spent more and more time with Wendy and the girls while Kim was with David. I took them to Florida, to Disneyland, Universal Studios, and the Seaquarium. The girls had a blast and tired us out, running everywhere we went. By the end of the week, we needed another vacation. The night we returned home, the girls were already asleep, and this time there was no arguing about bedtime. We left our suitcases in the living room to unpack tomorrow and went to our rooms. At some point during the night, she came to me, and we made love. When I woke up in the morning, I smelled breakfast cooking and went to the kitchen. Wendy looked at me from the stove and blushed to the roots of her hair. I laughed and hugged her, and we kissed. As we pulled away from each other, I noticed two eyes watching us, and Karen said, "It's about time." And she sat down at the table. After that, we became a couple with 2 children, whom I adored. It was 2 years before I could be free from Kim, and I couldn't be seen with Wendy in public, so we went to cities where they didn't know me. When Kim was away with David, we took short holidays with the kids. Since I was so busy working on my empire of 8 gyms and 11 apartment buildings generating rental income, I decided to stop competing in weightlifting and dedicate my time to the business and Wendy's. This meant a loss of income from sponsors, but I hardly noticed it. Wendy went to college to become an accountant while the girls were in school. I saw Kim a lot, but I rarely saw Darren, as per our contract. Nothing noteworthy happened over the next 18 months, except that I found out that my idiot brother had gone back to college and was dating a cute girl. The day came when Kim tearfully told me that she wanted a divorce so she could marry David. I was sad to lose my cohabitant, but we agreed and the divorce took place. I kept expecting trouble from Scott when he demanded the right to the house through my lawyer, but he didn't say a word. I now own a $1.2 million home. I decided that when the divorce was finalized, I would propose to Wendy and ask her where she wanted to live. Shortly before my divorce was finalized, I was contacted by my old friend Phil Harding, from whom I bought my first gym in Florida. The gym he worked out at was part of a chain of 8 gyms throughout Florida that the owner wanted to sell and asked if I would be interested in purchasing. I told Wendy I needed to go away for a few days, and she seemed more relieved than sad. I stayed with my old friend for a week. When I wasn't exploring the gyms, we went fishing, and he showed me the sights. I didn't buy gyms because they were in rental buildings, and I only bought my own space. I spent the whole week having fun with Phil, and then he drove me to the airport, and we said goodbye. While I was at Phil's, I tried to call Wendy, but her phone went straight to voicemail, and the same thing happened when I called the girls. I was a little upset that I couldn't contact them and wondered why. We landed at 2 a.m., so I picked up my truck from the long-term parking lot. I drove to the new house because I didn't want to disturb Wendy and the girls at such an early hour. The next day I went to the old house and saw Wendy's car in the driveway. This calmed me down a little because I was sure that they were okay. Usually, when I drove up to the house, the girls ran out to meet me, but not today. When I opened the door, the house seemed empty. I checked all the rooms and found that all their things were gone. Then I noticed a pile of things on the kitchen table with a letter. Dear Jay, I know that I am acting cowardly, but I could not bring myself to meet you and see the pain in your eyes. I've been dating someone else for the last 8 months, and we fell in love. I hid this from the girls, and when I told them, They got really angry with me. I went to live with him, and we are going to get married. I know this will come as a shock to you. I met him at the college where I study. He is studying business management, but soon expects to receive a large sum of money. I know this sounds mercantile, but I have to think about my girl's future first, and you seem content to run a gym and have no plans to expand. I won't tell you his name because I don't want you to look for him. I left you the car since you only have this old truck. I also left all of our phone numbers on the table, so please don't try to contact me. I know you've thought about marrying me, and I appreciate it. I also know that you have feelings for Kim and that she loves you. I kept the rings you bought us so we would look married so I wouldn't feel awkward in public. I will need them until we get married. I can't express how grateful I am for everything you've done for me and the girls over the years, and I'll never forget it. Please take care of yourself and live a happy life. Forever grateful. Wendy. I lowered the letter and sat down, immersed in tears. I lost two wonderful women in record time. What a fool I am. I was used and thrown away for financial gain. But thinking about it, I realized that I had avoided a serious problem. If I had married her, she might have left me later for someone richer. I never told her about my true wealth. I put the phones in the kitchen drawer and got to work cleaning out the old house. I emptied the refrigerator and left the door ajar, also turned off the freezer, turned off the water, put up the storm shutters, and locked the house. I didn't want to be there anymore. The house I loved was now full of bitter memories. When I left, I didn't even look back. The divorce was finalized the following week, and I was free. I threw myself into work, trying to forget Wendy and the girls. I was furious with Wendy, but most of all, I missed the girls. What did that say about me? I kept in touch with my parents and sister, and even visited them sometimes. My mother cooked my favorite dishes, and even my father began to welcome me warmly. One day, my mom called and asked me to come to the next Sunday dinner because Frank was going to bring his future wife and wanted to introduce us all to her. I didn't want to go, but my sister said it was time to bury the hatchet, and I agreed. I moved my parents into a managed condominium because their small apartment in a nursing home was no longer meeting their needs. When I arrived, I saw my sister's car parked outside and went inside. We talked while waiting for the big man to arrive, and my mother looked out the window, watching for them. Suddenly, she said that they had just parked and went to meet them. Frank walked into the house as if he owned it, and my dear Wendy was with him. Everyone, this is my future wife, Wendy. When Wendy saw me, she tried to move away from Frank, but he held her tightly. Everyone said hi and shook her hand. When I didn't move, all eyes turned to me. I think you already know Wendy, James, said my brother, squeezing her tighter. You see, James, whatever you have, I can take it. So say hello to your future ex-wife. I have your wife, and soon I will have your business and your house and half your money. He grinned as if he had already won, but Wendy was crying, tears streaming down her face. Mom looked at me and asked what was going on. I explained that Wendy was the woman I had told her about who had left me. Then I started laughing, which completely wiped the grin off Frank's face. When I could stop laughing, I explained. Well, Frank, you really live up to your nickname, Frank the Idiot. You are a complete fool. She is not my wife. We were never married, so if you marry her, you will not get anything from me. Frank looked at Wendy. You said you were married. I'm married, but not to James. My husband left me and the girls, and Jay took us in. I didn't even know you knew Jay. Was this all so you could get his money and business? Why? After all, he only makes money from the gym. I decided to twist the knife. In fact, this is not entirely true. I own several gyms and some apartment buildings. My net worth is about 20 million, give or take $1 million. What I didn't mention was that most of these funds were invested in projects, and I could have received maybe 250,000 in cash. The room became quiet, and then my mother said, Frank, what you did was disgusting, and I don't want anything more to do with you or your prostitute. Get out of here. I decided to add a little more. Wendy, when I got back from my trip, I was going to ask you to marry me, So Frank did me a favor. If we had gotten married and divorced, you would have become a rich woman, but you couldn't wait. I'm sure now that you have no monetary value to Frank, he'll drop you like a hot potato. I don't have feelings for you anymore, but I can't leave the girls on the street. So when he leaves you, call me and you can live in the old house. But you will have to work, since my free lunch is over. Frank and Wendy left together, thank God. Mom looked devastated, and Father went into his office and closed the door. I think the golden boy has lost his shine. I felt sorry for my mother. She prepared a full Sunday dinner with side dishes. Mom, it seems all your efforts are in vain, but Sarah and I are terribly hungry. What about dinner? I'm dying of hunger. Sarah looked at me and whispered words of gratitude. We sat down at the table, and my father joined us. After eating, while Sarah and Mom were clearing away the dishes, Dad looked at me and spoke for the first time that day. Sarah and Mom stopped cleaning and came over to listen. Son, I'm sorry for everything I did and didn't do when you were growing up. I was the worst father imaginable. I hope what I'm about to say will somehow fix this. While I was in my office, I wrote a new will. Frank will get nothing. You will get everything you deserve it. The company has never been in better shape, and it's thanks to you. We now live in a nice condominium, and that's also thanks to you. I bet on the wrong son, and I will always regret it. I hope you will forgive me someday. I went up to my father, hugged him, and said that I forgive him. This was the start of a mass family crying with smiles on everyone's faces. This also marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life. From then on, my father and I began to rebuild our relationship. We fished together and even caught a few fish. Now I lived in the new house full-time and only drove past the old house to look after it. One night, while I was sleeping in bed, there was a loud knock on the front door. I looked at my watch. It was 2:30 a.m. Damn it. I got out of bed. I picked up my phone, turned on the security software, and selected the front door. Kim stood there with Darren in her arms, and Miss Bland stood behind her with a bag. I rushed down to open the door. Kim pushed past me, followed by Miss B almost with a bag. She put the bag on the coffee table and dragged me to the kitchen. Mr. Price, I'm sorry for our sudden arrival, but we had nowhere else to go. Kim is in terrible shape. Mr. Clarence came home drunk with friends and demanded that Kim take part in indecent things. Kim managed to dodge him, grab Darren, and run to my door. I grabbed Darren's duffel bag and drove us to the airport, and here we are. I beg you, let us stay for a couple of days while we figure this out. Miss Bland, you can all stay here as long as you wish. There is no need to beg. The nursery is just as you left it, so why don't you put little Darren to bed and then come down and we can talk it over. Miss Bland nodded and followed Darren into the living room. Kim sat there crying, and I didn't know what to say, so I made us all coffee. When Miss Bland came down, I handed her coffee and motioned for her to sit next to Kim, who had stopped crying. I looked at Kim and asked her to tell me the whole story. Ever since Kim started living with Dave, he had been hinting at some unpleasant things for her, but Kim refused. Usually when she did this, he would run out of the house, saying that he would find someone to come home the next morning. This time he came home late drunk with two of his friends from the office, and he tried to do this to her using force. I sat there furious, but didn't know what to do. Why didn't you call the police and report him? He and his father own the police force in this city. They wouldn't help me there, so we came here. I don't even have a phone. I left my purse in the living room. Polina paid for plane tickets and a taxi, and here we are. I told Kim and Miss Bland to choose the room upstairs since I was now sleeping in the master bedroom. The next morning, as I got out of bed, I smelled bacon cooking and walked into the kitchen, expecting to see Kim. Miss Bland was standing at the stove, busily frying eggs, and she looked at me. "Morning, Mr. Price. I heard you moving, so I made you breakfast." I stood there with my mouth open. I was sure that she never liked me, so why cook me breakfast? Well, sit down and go to bed while it's still hot. I did as I was told and started eating, not even realizing how hungry I was. Miss Bland brought me coffee. It was just the way I liked it, hot, strong and sweet. I wondered how she knew this. In case you were wondering how I knew you liked this, Kim told me. When I first met you, I thought you were an opportunist taking advantage of Kim's predicament. As true as this may be, she told me that you were a kind and considerate person who treated her with respect. After last night, I reconsidered my first impression and came to the conclusion that you really care about Kim. If this is the case, then you can count on my support and gratitude. Having said this, she went to get me some supplements. This was the longest conversation I've had with her since we met almost 6 years ago. I finished breakfast and went to my office. I canceled a meeting with the manager of my family business and said I would reschedule the meeting. Now that I had a clear day, I could focus on Kim's problems. Kim went to bed late, as did Darren. When they showed up, Miss Bland made breakfast for them, and I went back to my office to give them some privacy. When I walked into my office, I left the door open, and when I looked up, Darren was standing and looking at me. I had no experience with a 5-year-old child, so I didn't know what to do. He came and stood next to me. "What are you doing, Mr. Price?" he asked. "Well, I have some things to do, but that doesn't matter. What would you like to do?" "Go to the park." "Sounds great. Let's ask your mom." At that moment, Kim came in and apologized for disturbing me. I told her about our conversation, and she agreed. I wanted her to call the sheriff and report the attack on Dave. Kim and I sat and watched Miss Bland play with Darren on the swing. "Kim, you can't stay, can you? Home is the first place they'll look for you." Kim started crying and squeezed my hand. "I have nowhere else to go. Please don't kick us out." "Kim, I'm not going to kick you out. I just meant that you're not safe where we are. Your father and Dave knows my address and might come looking for you when I'm gone. If you let me, I will move you to an old house where you will be safe. I won't come because I might be followed, but you can call me any time. There is a car there that you can use. This will only be until you're divorced from Dave, then you can come back, and I will move into the old house. I want you and Darren to be safe. There is more than enough room for Miss Bland. What do you think?" "Sorry, Jay. I should have known you wouldn't kick us out. What you suggested sounds like a good idea, so what should we do now? I only have what I'm wearing, I need clothes, and so does Paulin." "No problem. When we're done here, we'll go to the sheriff and report David, and then have lunch and some shopping. Don't be offended, I'll pay for everything, and later we can arrange to go to David's house and pick up the rest of your things." Here's what we did. The visit to the sheriff didn't go well. He said he had no jurisdiction in New York State, so his hands were tied, but he would turn the complaint over to the state cops since we don't trust the local Leos. Lunch was at Red Lobster's as Darren liked it there. Shopping took the most time and cost a fortune. I didn't mind. I had nothing else to spend the money on. We returned to the house and collected the small amount of things they had managed to bring with them. I then took them to stock up on food for a couple of days, after which they could fill the freezer. When we got to the house I hadn't been to in months, I felt sad about my loss. Kim asked me what was wrong while Miss Bland wandered around the house while Darren explored the house. I told her about Wendy, and when I finished she had tears on her face and hugged me tightly but didn't say a word. A week later, a detective called at the big house and asked about Kim. I said I hadn't seen her since the divorce, and he left. I told Kim that David was looking for her. I stayed away from the old house in case they followed me. We went to David's house, and Kim let us in with a hidden key, and we packed up all their things and sent them to the old house. Kim started the divorce proceedings by giving her lawyer power of attorney so she wouldn't have to see David. Nothing came of the charges against him, so I guess he had the local law in his pocket. Things went well. David didn't contest the divorce, possibly because someone threatened to go public about that night if he did, and a few months later Kim found herself single again. I offered to move her back to the big house, but she said she liked living where she was, so I was left alone again. Then one day Kim called me and invited me to dinner. Of course I went. When I got there, I noticed her car wasn't there and wondered if I had gotten the date wrong. I knocked on the door even though I had the key. Kim opened the door dressed like she was about to go out and looked like $1,000,000. "Oh, sorry, Kim. I must have got the date wrong. I'll leave you to get ready for your date." As I turned to leave, she grabbed my arm and spun me around. "My date just arrived." "Oh, sorry to bother you. Please apologize to him for me." She started laughing and said, "You are my friend. Now come in. Dinner is almost ready." I felt like a complete fool. "In that case, you better have it." And I handed her 2 bottles of wine, red and white, since I didn't know what would be for dinner. Dinner was amazing. Beef Wellington with roasted potatoes and asparagus tips, served with red currant and garlic butter sauce. This is followed by lemon sorbet, so it was red wine. We put the dishes away and loaded the dishwasher. I was expecting Miss Bland and Darren to join us. Pauline took Darren to my parents for the weekend, so it's just you and me. We were sitting, talking, and drinking when I noticed that the time was 11:30 p.m. We also finished white. I was in no condition to drive home, so I started calling a taxi when Kim took the phone from me and turned it off. "You don't have to leave. You can stay in the master bedroom. I still prefer the bedroom next to Darren." So we just sat and talked until 2 in the morning about everything and nothing. I realized that I hadn't had such a pleasant evening since Wendy left. I also realized that it no longer hurts me to think about her. By this time, we were both trying not to yawn, so we decided to call it a day. When we said goodnight, Kim gave me a short kiss. She went upstairs to her bedroom, leaving me in need of a cold shower. I went to the master bedroom, took a shower, climbed into bed, and fell asleep almost instantly. Some time later, Kim came to me, and we made love. When I woke up in the morning, she was no longer there, so I took a shower and went to the kitchen. Kim stood at the stove, surrounded by food. "Okay, you're up. I can start breakfast. What would you like?" "What about the same thing as last night?" "You'll need your energy later, kid. We have all day." And that's exactly what we did. 3 months later, I asked her to marry me, and she accepted. Her father was beside himself with anger. He had gone to great lengths to secure her future with David, and now she was marrying a man with no prospects. He didn't know what I did for a living or how successful I had become. Her mother, on the other hand, welcomed me into the family with a big hug and a whisper. "I hoped you two would end up together. I saw that you were meant for each other, even if you couldn't." She then kissed me on the cheek and walked over to Kim and did the same. 3 months later, we became husband and wife. We lived in the old house with Miss Bland and Darren, who was now doing his best to wear Miss Bland out. When I started paying attention to Darren, he responded well. I think he was missing male company. I would come home, and he would rush into my arms and demand that we play with his cars, catch a ball, or whatever else he wanted to do. I haven't heard from Wendy since we met at my parents' house. She didn't accept my offer of a place to live, and I haven't heard from her or my brother. So it was a complete shock when Kim called me and asked me to come home as soon as possible, but did not tell me why. I didn't have anything urgent, so I went home. When I opened the door, I was stunned. Karen and Kirsty were sitting on the sofa. I looked at Kim, and she motioned for me to join her in the kitchen. Darren and Miss Bland were nowhere to be seen. "Jay, I wanted to talk to you first before Karen told me everything. I ask you to listen to her before you jump to conclusions. Will you do that for me?" "Of course, honey. I don't blame them for what their mother did. They should have done what they were told." I then spent the next hour talking to the girls, mostly Karen. As I suspected, as soon as Frank found out that Wendy was not my wife, he dropped her and the girls like hot potatoes and disappeared. He told her the house belonged to him, but it was a rental property and they were 2 months behind on their rent. She was evicted again, but this time she went to live with her sister. While living there, her ex-husband returned and she moved back in with him. Karen said they left the house and didn't come back for a week. Karen was 18 years old and an adult, and when their parents didn't come back for over a week, she packed some things and hitchhiked to my place. She begged me to let them stay, but I explained that she could stay, but Kirsty was still underage. I called the sheriff's department and reported the children's arrival, and they said they would send someone from child welfare. While we waited, Miss Bland made them something to eat, and they ate as if they were hungry. When the child protection officer arrived, I took him into the living room where the children were and left them alone. An hour later, the employee asked me to join them. She explained that since Karen was 18 years old and considered an adult, she could take responsibility for Kirsty if she had a place to live. I asked her to give me a minute to talk to my wife. I thought I knew what the answer would be, but I still had to ask. When I asked Kim if they could stay with us until their mother was found, she insisted that was exactly what we should do. When I told the employee our decision, Karen nearly knocked me off my feet when she jumped into my arms. The employee thanked us and said she would come again in a few days, and then left. We only had one unoccupied bedroom, and it only had a double bed, so the girls had to sleep together. Kim took them to their room so they could get ready for bed. Karen could have stayed up, but she didn't want to leave Kirsty alone, so she said goodbye and went to bed. Karen only packed a few things in her backpack, so Kim took them shopping the next day. I took the day off to be there, and while they were away, I hired a private investigator to try to find Wendy. When they returned with a dozen bags full of absolutely necessary items, I had another surprise for them. When Wendy left, she left their numbers, and I didn't think to cancel the contracts, so they were still active. I gave them their old phones and told them to call their aunt and tell them where they were. The sleeping arrangements weren't ideal, but I thought it was temporary, so I left it as is. Over the next few weeks, it became clear that the girls would be staying with us longer than I thought. We couldn't move into a bigger house since I was renting it out, so I started looking for another solution. After discussing everything with Kim, we came to a decision about Miss Bland. She was no longer needed as a nanny, since Darren was now in primary school. We asked Miss Bland to sit down with us to discuss her future. When she sat down across from us at the kitchen table, she looked me straight in the eyes and said, "I have been afraid of this for a long time. Darren doesn't need me anymore, and now you need more sleeping places. I understand, and I have already sent my resume to an agency looking for another job. In the meantime, I'm looking for a cheap apartment, so I'll be out of your way soon. I really enjoyed working for you both, but all good things must come to an end, so I'll be leaving soon. All I ask is that you give me a recommendation." The latter was said with tears in her eyes. I looked at Kim, and she was crying too, so I spoke for both of us. "Miss Bland, I don't know where you get these thoughts, but the last thing we want is for you to leave. We hoped that you would stay with us as long as you wanted. Now you are part of this family. We wanted to talk to you to tell you that you are indispensable to us and to see if you feel the same. If so, I suggest building a 2-room apartment over the garage so that you have your own space. In return, I want you to be our housekeeper. You will be paid the standard rate plus 20% with the usual benefits such as paid time off and a pension plan. What do you say to this?" Miss Bland burst into tears and said, "God bless you both. You have made me the happiest woman in the world. Thank you very much. I was afraid to part with little Darren. Now I can see him grow up and become a man." Kim hugged her, and I went to get coffee. When I returned, they were still hugging, so I went to my home office to work. That still left one bedroom short-term, but I thought I had a solution. The next day, I called a crew from my construction company and told them what I needed. Over the next 3 weeks, construction began on an apartment for Miss Bland and my decision. I built a ready-made 2-bedroom attached to the garage with heat and air conditioning. My home office was converted into a bedroom for Karen, and the problem was solved. Just when I thought I had solved all the questions, Kim said the very words I was afraid to hear. "Jay, we need to talk." I sat down opposite her, expecting the worst. "Jay, I know you spent a lot of money on expanding your house, but it's still not enough." At first, I was relieved that these were not the words that usually precede bad news, but then I wondered, what does "not enough" mean? I looked at Kim, who was smiling, and raised my eyebrows. "Well, Jay, it's time for your brain to kick in. I'm pregnant." I literally lifted her out of her chair and started twirling her around the room, screaming, "I'm going to be a daddy. over and over again. When I finally let her sit down, I noticed 3 pairs of eyes watching me. Miss Bland, Karen, and Kirsty were all laughing and applauding. They came up and congratulated us, and Miss Bland said, "Looks like my babysitting days aren't over yet." Over the next few weeks, I approached an architect to draw up plans for adding 3 more bedrooms with another bathroom. While I was at it, I asked him to consider the pool. My main concern was that Karen and Kirsty were in limbo. Karen needed to work or continue her studies, and Kirsty needed to go to school. I had nothing to worry about, since everything was soon to be decided. My private investigator called and said he had the address where Wendy and her husband were. It was in a bad area, so I took an old truck instead of a car and went to investigate. I found her, took her from there, and helped her recover. I still had feelings for Wendy, and especially for her girls. I enrolled Kirsty in a school nearby, where I found them an apartment. Karen was a good student and graduated with mostly excellent grades, so I found her a place at our local college where she studied English and math. I convinced Wendy to get a degree in accounting, and I would pay all the bills. Kim said she was very proud of me for helping Wendy and the girls after what she did. They were regular guests in our home, and all the children got along like family. I, on the other hand, was unhappy with my brother. In my opinion, it was his fault, and he walked away unscathed as usual. I felt he needed to feel some pain, so I asked the private investigator I had used before to track him down. Roger was not a problem, as he was now serving a 15-year sentence for various crimes. Time passed, and Kim gave me a beautiful boy, William Gerald Price. Named after both of our fathers, Kim and I hoped it would help heal the rift between her father and me. Both grandparents were delighted, and her father seemed to warm up to me when Kim told him it was my idea. We now went to her parents' house for dinner at least once a month, and we did the same with my parents. One day, my private investigator called me and said that he had found Frank, who was working as a sales manager for his family's construction supply company. I thought about my revenge. Should I let sleeping dogs lie, or should I stir the potty? I decided he needed some form of punishment. I decided to remain anonymous and emailed the owner. I stated that Frank worked for the company where I worked and was fired for embezzlement. Let them take the next step. Kirsty was 18 and wanted to study economics and business management. As with Karen, I paid for her tuition in advance. Wendy was now my accountant for all my businesses and was paid well. She tried to refuse my offer, but I pointed out that I had paid for Karen, so it was fair, and she gave in. I talked to Kim about it first, and she was completely on board with the idea. Time passed, and William was just over 3 years old when Kim told me we needed to talk again. This time I wasn't worried, and Kim and I were firm she was pregnant again. As a result, I have my 3-year-old daughter, Sarah, fast asleep on my lap in honor of my sister, which takes us back to the beginning of my story. Life is beautiful if you care about it and are kind to others. My brother Frank was convicted of embezzlement and received 7 years in prison. Karma is really that kind of thing. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.